Hello, welcome to Unit 4, Lesson 6, Social Identity Theory. Social identity theory is proposed by Tashfeld and Turner in 1979, and there are two types of identity. The first one is social identity. This is how you are like other, and your sense of self is based on the group that you are in. So you can divide yourself into like the nationality, gender, occupation, and as for personal identity, this is how you see yourself as different from other. So you can have unique personality and hobbies that set you apart from other people. So here are some components of the social identity theory. So this theory states that people derive their identity from their group membership, and that's why people tend to associate themselves with more positive than negative, because the positive group give them a better sense of identity and would make them more wanting to associate themselves with a group than the group that has no success. And intergroup conflict is also caused by the need for self-esteem. So whenever people fight or involve into conflicts, this is because they want to make themselves better than other, because they need the self-esteem. And permeability is when people have the ability to leave the group that they don't like and join another group. And those that are impermeable, so they can't leave their group, they tend to display in-group favoritism. This is when you talk good about yourself and your group and talk bad about people of the out group. And all of this comes down is to increase the self-esteem. Okay, so the four components of the social identity theory are social categorization, social identification, social comparison, and positive distinctiveness. So social categorization is when you put people into groups. So you can split them based on their race, religion, gender, or age. So this is like the us and them. So you divide yourself into groups. And the outgroup homogeneity effects is shown, which is when people tend to assume that the outgroup member of the same group share the same characteristic. So an example of this is that you assume that all Asian people are like good at math, although that is not true. And this is an example of an outgroup homogeneity effect. And social identification is when you identify yourself in a group and you start forming bond and adopting its value. So as for identification, you can get identity by default. So like you're born with your gender, so you identify with that gender. However, this can also be by identification by adopting a new one. So this is when you convert a religion and you identify with this new religion rather than your old one. As for social comparison, this is when you compare your in-group to out-group. So people tend to display in-group favoritism by looking for advantages from their own group and deficiencies from the outside group, so the opponent group. And all of this comes down is that you need the boost in self-esteem. That's why you look for the advantages. So you look better than the other group. And the goal of social comparison is to reach positive distinctiveness. So this is when you believe one group is better than another. An example of this is ethnocentrism, which is the belief that one ethnic is better than the other in the city. And this can result in conflicts because while trying to see who is better, conflict may occur because of that, because everyone would want their group to be better in order to boost their self-esteem. So here's the evaluation of the social identity theory. So a strength of this is that it has high research support. So studies like Sardini and Tachfeld has the similar results. So you can say that this has a high reliability. This theory has a high reliability. And this theory also describes the cognitive processes behind that explain the in-group favoritism and the loyalty, and also the out-group hostility. And the cognitive processes include like the four components of the social identity theory, which are categorization, identification, social comparison, and positive distinctiveness. And however, there are some limitations, and one of this is that social identity theory explain intergroup rivalries, so like hostility between two groups, due to the need for self-esteem. So they basically states that the reason why we fight with other group is because we want to make ourselves feel better. So this is to boost our self-esteem, but they do not address other factors that could influence the relation as well, such as limited resources and historical rivalries. These two factors could explain why people involved in conflicts, but the SIT just states that the reason why we show hostility against other group is because we need self-esteem. And another limitation is that this does not explain why some groups have friendly rival relationship, because this theory assumes that we tend to like our group more and show hostility towards the out group because we view ourselves as better. However, there are groups out there that involve in friendly rival relationship, and this theory just does not explain or support this. So some studies that support the social identity theory are Tashfel and Sharif. So in Tashfel, the participants were divided into two groups based on their estimation of thoughts. So one group were put into the overestimator and underestimator. And this process is known as social categorization. And they start adopting their values, their group, and forming bond. So this is social identification. And the result shows that the boys tend to give more points to the member of their own group. So this is when in-group favoritism is shown, because they view themselves as better, so they like their group more, so they give them more points. And they also rate their in-group member as more likable. So this is also in-group favoritism. And in the second study, it was the same thing, but just now that they were divided into two groups based on their artist preference, Kandinsky or Klee. And they were also asked to give point. And in here, the boys also try to maximize the score difference by giving their group a lot more point than the other group. And this is positive distinctiveness is shown here because they view themselves as better, so they give their group more point than the other. And another study that support this is Sharif, and this is also known as the Robbers Cave experiment. So in here, the boys were divided into groups, and they were asked to form bond with their own group, and they do not know the existence of the other group. However, on the second stage, they were introduced to one another and asked to compete in a competition to gain a reward and stuff like that. And in the third stage, they were asked to work together to achieve a common goal, which is to push up a truck. And they found that when they were asked to compete against one another, both groups create their own team names. So one group was named Eagles and the other was named Rattlers. And they also create their own flags. So in here, social categorization is shown because they mentally divide themselves into two groups, Eagles versus Rattlers. And identification is shown when they start liking their group and forming bond and create their own flag. And social comparison is when they compete against one another to see who's the winner. And as for positive distinctiveness, this is when one group thinks they are better, so they start to name call like shouting towards the other and raid each other cabins because they think that their group is better. So this is their action demonstrate out-group hostility. However, when they work together, they became friends. So this shows that when no categorization like happened, this is when they became one, they start to become friendly again because they start to adopt their own value and view themselves as a unified group rather than two groups that are competing against one another. So overall, this theory shows that identity plays a high emphasis on the group membership that they're in. And this is really affects how people really behave. And that's the end. See you next video.